A major challenge for energy communities is access to finance. I have Stanislas with me, and we are going to dive into this problem. Hi Stan, thank you for being here.
Hi, Ati.
So, can you please tell me why this is a big problem for energy communities?
So, the community energy movement has been growing since the past 20 years. However, the big problem is really the adequacy of financial tools and products that do exist to support the development of the energy community movement. The problem really is that the financial markets are not really set up to actually support the type of projects that community energy is developing right now. That might be because of the way energy communities are formed through their collective actions. That might be through the adequacy of products and the fact that the type of loans or the type of guarantees are not existing currently in the market. Or simply the fact that they are not coming at the right moment, right? They are too small, or they are not exactly adequately coming into the financial indicators that are looked for in banking partners or investors in general.
Can you please give me some examples of energy communities that REScoop is collaborating with that are facing this problem?
Absolutely. So I think there are three types of barriers that energy communities are facing currently in terms of financing. The first one, like I said, is the adequacy of the products. So the fact that community projects are generally, quote unquote, too small for banking actors. For instance, the energy community here in Brussels called Brewpower is looking to finance energy sharing projects on large rooftops. The type of projects that we're talking about are a volume of around 30 to 35,000 euros. Obviously, you're looking for loans that are equivalent to 50 to 60% of the base investment. When you're talking to a bank of a loan investment of 15 to 20,000 euros, it's simply too small. You're going into a category of loan that is not interesting for a bank. And so therefore it was very difficult, almost impossible for our member to actually source this type of financing. The way it was allowed to finance those type of projects was going through the support of public authorities, and specifically the regional bank, the regional development bank. So that is the first barrier. The projects are just too small. The second one is the adequacy of the product, meaning when are they actually arriving? And there it comes as it relates to the way energy communities are actually financing the projects. I know you know how energy communities are built up. They are built from a number of citizens joining together and investing collectively into an energy project, whatever it may be. And so it means that the beginning is usually very hard in terms of pre-development and development cost, simply because you have a very small group that don't necessarily have the means that private investors have. And so the problem is that you're trying to preserve the governance model of an energy community, which has to be democratic, usually around one member, one vote, and the necessity to reach larger investors that are going to be able to bear the cost of this development and pre-development phase. For most traditional projects, that's not a problem because they have the big investors. But then they are looking for loans, mostly debt financing for projects. That's not the case for energy communities, because as soon as the project is actually reaching financial close, we see the amount of fundraising grow significantly. And usually most of the debt financing is reimbursed in a very short amount of time. And so the problem is that we are looking at a problem in reverse for financial institutions. The problem is not then this project financing, but really the beginning, the organizational support that needs to happen from the get-go. That's the second barrier. And the third one is in terms of the typology of projects, and once again, the portfolio aspect that is brought into the fold when you're looking at financing energy communities. Most of the managing authorities and the banking partners that we're working with are telling us two things. One, you only have one project for your organization that's extremely risky to invest in, and so you're considered a very risky investment. And two, you have a collective governance model. And so necessarily it makes it difficult for us as banking institutions to really understand who bears the responsibility. And so instead of trying to understand this specific model, we'd rather not go. And that's really how the conversation has been shaped in the past 5 years for our members, generally. Either you already have a lot of projects and you're already established, in which case banking partners are more than happy to invest, investors are knocking on your door, or you're small and starting, and in which case it's almost impossible to even get a meeting.
That calls for consumer empowerment, if I'm not mistaken. And how does REScoop help on that?
So for us, the point is really an issue with governance, and it's the allowing citizens to really keep the control of the project through time. So that's why also the type of financial products that needs to be built are a little bit different. Citizens generally are more than happy to partner up with any company, public authority, bank, investor that is looking to support them, but they need to remain in control of the project and to have a way to continue the purpose of the energy community, which is first and foremost social cohesion. And so that's really where the consumer empowerment is coming in, right? Is trying to preserve that governance model, while at the same time providing for, all the guarantees that financial institutions are trying to bring in. That tension is really where we see, work needs to be done. As REScoop.eu, what we're doing right now is we're carrying out a project called ACE, for Access to Capital for Community Energy, that is looking at the development of public and private programs dedicated for energy communities, really working on those governance aspects, protecting the investors, but also protecting the general governance of the energy community, creating specific tools for community energy projects, but also allowing for a safe and stable investment for institutional investors.
Stanislas, to be honest, from what you described, I can understand the democratization of the whole thing. I don't, however, I'm not, let's say, convinced about the profit part, because let's face it, profit is also an issue. So what are the next steps? How can we ensure that there will be profit for companies like that, for banks to actually invest?
Absolutely. So the most important thing to understand is that indeed profit will not be the main focus. Financial profit is not the goal of energy communities, nor it is of most community organizations, meaning groups of citizens working together for the energy transition. And that is something that needs to be really clear in investors' mind as well as banking partners. That said, the profile of cooperative investors and community investors in general is mostly safe, mostly conservative, and therefore we are looking at organizations that will be here for a really long time. And that is really how those investments should be considered. Not necessarily performance, but really impactful at the local level for the long term, creating that community dynamic. And so that's why when we talk about impact investing, that is really where we see the benefit of the partnership between financial institutions and energy communities, those traditional investors and community projects. It's really looking at how to create the maximum amount of benefits at the local level, on ESGs, on looking at democratization, you mentioned it, on looking at social inclusion, climate and transition, sobriety and efficiency, really looking at those key things that we need for the energy transition, while at the same time, preserving a long-term sustainable investment that will remain the base of your portfolio. And that is something that energy communities are really good at delivering. The problem is to find that right balance between understanding that your money needs to be safe, and we all understand that, and at the same time, respecting as well that the democratic governance is key to actually preserving the long-term development of those organizations.
Well, it seems to me that fair legislation and regulation could help. So what would you ask the EU Commission or local authorities to do for that?
Well, I think obviously regulation is super important. And I think there are many people here at the European State of Energy Week that talked about it and talked about how to move forward. What I will bring is a mapping that we did with the team at REScoop.eu of Cohesion, Recovery and Modernization Fund currently being dispersed across the continent. So we did actually a mapping of how energy communities were targeted by those funds across Europe, and to look at what managing authorities understand based on the objectives that were carried out or highlighted by DG Regio, and what type of program would they develop on the back of that. The reality is actually quite bleak, to be honest with you. Not many programs are currently targeting energy communities. Not many financing schemes are actually being set up, and the ones that are being set up are actually not suitable to energy communities the way we are describing them right now. So it is quite a bleak outlook. However, the positive note is that when we then went back to managing authorities, when we went back to the European Commission, the message that we got in return was, a message of strong political will. There is really a desire to do better. And that is really where we see value, to try to do better and to try to find the right tools and incentives to support energy communities. And so, could the European Commission do more? Absolutely. Could they be more strict? Absolutely. Could they put in place more dedicated financial schemes? We really hope so. We are specifically hoping for the Energy Community Facility that is going to come November 2023. So we're really looking at all those things. We are, of course, encouraging the Commission to do even more, work with the EIB, work with the other financial institutions of the continent to try to create specific funds for energy communities. But also we're looking at supporting on the technical level banks, investors, local authorities, regional authorities, national authorities to really create those programs and better understand the needs of energy communities. And there, let me send a message to all the financial institutions across Europe that we are working with, some of them, managing authorities obviously. Come to see us, come to your national federations of energy communities, come talk to the repository for energy communities at the European level. We have tools for that, and we're willing to help, obviously. That's why we're here.
And on that note, thank you very much, Stan.
Thank you, Areti.
Thank you all for watching. Please remember to subscribe to our website if you want to learn more.